7. Fear is stronger when you don't act. Faith requires action. When you delay action, fear grows. David ran toward Goliath. Abraham left his country. Peter stepped out of the boat. Movement weakens fear. Many people build faith internally but refuse to take the next step. Start the business. Apply for the opportunity. Forgive again. Try again. Love again. Fear survives in hesitation. Faith grows in obedience. 8. Fear feeds on, what if? Faith says, what if God does it? Fear says, what if it fails? Faith imagines possibility. Fear imagines disaster. The mind cannot hold two dominant imaginations at once. Whatever you rehearse mentally becomes stronger. If someone keeps replaying negative possibilities, fear will choke the faith they are building. 9. How to deal with fear while building faith. This part should bring structure to the teaching. 1. Acknowledge fear. Pretending you are not afraid does not remove fear. Admit it to God. 2. Replace thoughts immediately. Don't let fearful thoughts settle. Counter them with truth. 3. Act quickly on obedience. The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes. 4. Stop feeding fear. Reduce exposure to negative voices and constant comparison. 5. Remember past victories. If God did it before, He can do it again. 10. The real truth. Fear does not mean you have no faith. This is the balance your audience needs. Even strong believers experienced fear. David later faced discouragement. Abraham laughed in doubt. Peter denied Jesus out of fear. But fear did not define them. What matters is not whether fear appears. What matters is which voice you obey. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is choosing to move despite fear. Closing charge for the video. Some people build faith but still struggle because fear was never uprooted. They watered faith, but they never starved fear. And fear grows in silence. So in this journey we are building, do not just increase your faith. Confront your fear, speak again, move again, trust again, pray again, try again, because fear may visit, but it does not have permission to lead. And when faith becomes louder than fear, that is when manifestation follows. One of the most confusing experiences in a believer's journey is this. You are praying, you are declaring, you are studying, you are building faith, yet you are still struggling. And quietly, doubt begins to whisper. This is important for your audience to understand. Struggle does not mean absence of faith. And doubt creeping in does not mean faith has died. Let's go deep. Keycap 1. Faith and feelings are not the same thing. Many people assume that if they truly have faith, they should always feel confident, bold, and unshaken. But faith is not a feeling. Faith is a decision. Look at Book of Matthew 14:22-33, when Peter walked on water. Peter stepped out in faith. That means faith was present. But while walking, he saw the wind and became afraid. Notice something powerful. Fear came after faith acted. Doubt often creeps in after you have already stepped out. This means, you can move in faith, and still feel fear. You can believe, and still fight internal thoughts. Struggle does not cancel faith. It reveals that you are human. Keycap 2. Faith grows in layers, not instantly. Some people build faith but expect instant maturity. Faith is like muscle. Since you love structured growth and orderliness, think of this like mathematics progression. You don't jump to advanced calculus without mastering basics. Faith also develops progressively. Weak faith, growing faith, strong faith, tested faith, mature faith. In Book of Genesis 12, Abraham moved before evidence. That was strong faith. But later, in Genesis 16, he struggled and tried to help God through human effort. So even Abraham, the father of faith, had moments of struggle. Faith is built, but it is also refined. Struggle is part of refinement. Keycap 3. Doubt creeps in when expectations clash with timing. One major reason people struggle after building faith is this. They expected results by now. Faith says, it will happen. But timing says, not yet. And that gap between promise and manifestation is where doubt tries to live. Look at David in 1st Book of Samuel 17. He killed Goliath with bold faith. But after that victory, he did not become king immediately. There were years of running, hiding, and being hunted. Imagine, you defeat your biggest enemy. Then instead of promotion, you enter isolation. That is where doubt whispers, did I really hear God? Was that victory real? Why am I still struggling? Many people build faith for the battle. But they were not prepared for the waiting season after the battle. Keycap 4. Faith does not eliminate process. This is crucial for your audience. Faith does not remove process. Faith empowers you to endure process. In Gospel of Mark 5:25-34, the woman with the issue of blood pushed through the crowd and touched Jesus. Her healing was instant, but her suffering lasted 12 years. Her faith acted in one moment, but her struggle lasted over a decade. Some people build faith and expect struggle to disappear immediately. But sometimes, faith changes you before it changes your situation. Faith strengthens you before it solves the problem. Faith stabilizes your heart while the storm continues. Remember Peter again. The storm did not stop when he stepped out of the boat. The storm was still there. Faith does not mean absence of wind. It means movement despite wind. Keycap 5 Doubt creeps in when you compare journeys. Comparison is a silent faith killer. You are building faith, but someone else seems to be manifesting results faster. You start asking, why them and not me? Am I doing something wrong? Even strong believers face this. In the Psalms, David questioned why the wicked prospered while he struggled. That is honest faith. Struggle becomes heavier when you measure your timeline against someone else's. But faith is personal. Calling is personal. Timing is personal. Just because someone else is in harvest season does not mean your seed is dead. Doubt creeps in when you feed the wrong voice. Faith comes by hearing, but doubt also comes by hearing. If you consistently feed fear-based conversations, negative environments, voices of impossibility, doubt will naturally grow. It doesn't mean your faith was fake. It means your spiritual diet shifted. Even Elijah, after calling down fire from heaven, later ran in fear when he heard Jezebel's threat. One voice shifted his emotional state. Faith must be maintained, not just built. Keycap 7 Hidden struggles don't cancel visible faith. This is important for your YouTube audience. Many strong believers struggle silently. They preach boldly. They encourage others. They pray powerfully. Yet internally, they wrestle questions. Faith is not the absence of internal wrestling. Faith is choosing God in the middle of wrestling. Jacob wrestled all night but left with a blessing. Struggle can coexist with faith. Keycap 8 Sometimes struggle is evidence of growth. Here is a deep truth. When you build faith, you become a threat to doubt. So doubt fights back. The moment you decide, I will trust again. I will move again. I will pray again. Resistance increases. Why? Because growth invites opposition. A seed underground faces pressure before it breaks through soil. Pressure does not mean death. Pressure often means expansion. Keycap 9 What to do when doubt creeps in. This is where you guide them practically in the video. When doubt creeps in, return to what God already did. Remember past victories. Speak before you feel strong. Faith speaks before manifestation. Stay disciplined in small obedience. Faith is not just big declarations. It is daily consistency. Accept that growth includes tension. Even Jesus in Gethsemane expressed deep emotion before surrendering. Doubt is a visitor. It does not have to become a resident. If someone is building faith but still struggling, tell them this. You are not failing. You are developing. The presence of struggle does not mean absence of God. The presence of questions does not mean absence of belief. Faith is not linear. It has high days, silent days, testing days, victorious days. But as long as you keep choosing to trust, faith is alive. Onyekachi, this part will make your 1-hour teaching more relatable and mature. It shows balance. It shows depth. It shows that faith is not fantasy, it is a journey. And remind them, doubt may whisper, but faith decides. This is a powerful segment for the faith teaching. It adds balance. Because if we only teach, have faith, without teaching, guard your ears, we leave people confused when they still struggle. Let's go deep. Faith is not built in silence. Faith is built by voices. The question is not, do you have faith? The question is, who is feeding your faith? The Bible says in open book epistle to the Romans 10:17. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Notice it didn't say faith comes by wishing. It didn't say faith comes by feeling. It said faith comes by hearing. If faith comes by hearing, then doubt also comes by hearing. That is why some people pray, fast, declare scriptures, and still struggle, because their faith is being built on Sunday but attacked by wrong voices from Monday to Saturday. Keycap 1 The voice of fear. When David faced Goliath in open book 1st book of Samuel 17, everyone saw a giant. But David heard something different. Saul heard threat. The soldiers heard danger. Goliath heard victory. David heard covenant. Why? Because David had been listening to God long before he arrived at the battlefield. The wrong voice will always magnify the problem more than the promise. If you constantly listen to people who speak defeat, news that only spreads panic, friends who mock faith, your own inner voice of insecurity, you may be building faith, but you're also feeding fear. And whatever you feed grows. Keycap 2 The voice of logic without God. There is nothing wrong with logic. You love mathematics, and mathematics is logical and structured. But even in math, we know that assumptions affect results. If you start with the wrong premise, your conclusion will be wrong even if your calculations are correct. Some people start with this premise: God can, but maybe not for me. Faith works, but my case is different. Yes, miracles happened in the Bible, but today is different. That voice sounds reasonable, it sounds mature, it sounds intelligent, but it slowly weakens bold faith. In Open Book Gospel of Matthew 14, when Peter walked on water, the storm didn't stop. The wind didn't disappear. Logic was screaming, "You can't walk on water." But Peter was fine while listening to Jesus. The moment he listened to the wind, he began to sink. Wrong voices don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper facts without faith. Keycap 3: The voice of past failure. This one is dangerous. Some people built faith before. They prayed, they believed, and something didn't happen the way they expected. Now, every time they try to believe again, a voice says, "Remember last time." Don't embarrass yourself. Be realistic. That voice is not wisdom. It is wounded memory. In Open Book of Genesis 12, Abraham moved before evidence. Imagine if he had listened to voices saying, "You're too old. You don't have a child. You are leaving security." Faith moves before results, but wrong voices pull you back to yesterday's disappointment. If you keep replaying old defeats, you will struggle to walk into new victories. Keycap 4: The voice of wrong company. Faith is contagious, but doubt is also contagious. The 10 spies in Open Book of Numbers 13 saw giants and spread fear. Only Joshua and Caleb spoke faith. Same land, same promise, different voices. The entire nation suffered because they chose the majority voice instead of the faith voice. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every advice deserves your agreement. Some people are struggling not because God is silent, but because too many other voices are loud. Keycap 5: The voice of social comparison. Today, comparison is amplified by social media. You are believing God for growth. Then you see someone else already there. You are praying for open doors. Then you see someone celebrating breakthroughs. A voice whispers, "You're behind. Maybe your faith is weak. Maybe God prefers others." That is a wrong voice. Faith is personal. God deals with people differently. David was anointed in secret before he was celebrated publicly. If you measure your faith journey by someone else's timeline, you will struggle unnecessarily. Keycap 6: The voice of internal doubt. Sometimes the loudest wrong voice is inside. You pray boldly in church. But alone at night, your thoughts say, "What if this doesn't work? What if nothing changes?" Faith must be protected internally. This is why meditation on the Word is powerful. Not just reading, but repeating, declaring, and internalizing. You cannot stop birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from building a nest. You may not stop doubt from knocking, but you don't have to give it residence. Why they struggle. So why do some people build faith and still struggle? Because faith is built intentionally, but doubt enters casually. They pray but don't guard their conversations. Declare scriptures but binge on negativity. Believe in public but entertain fear in private. Faith is not only about what you confess. It is also about what you consistently consume. How to guard your faith. For this segment in your video, give them solutions. Small Diamond 1. Audit your voices. Ask yourself, who influences my thinking most? What do I listen to daily? What conversations weaken my confidence? Small Diamond 2. Limit access to negativity. Not everyone needs full access to your dreams. Even Jesus didn't allow everyone into certain rooms. Small Diamond 3. Replace, don't just remove. Don't just stop listening to wrong voices, replace them with scripture, faith messages, testimonies, encouraging community. Small Diamond 4. Speak back. When fear speaks, answer it. David didn't keep quiet before Goliath. He declared victory before it happened. Faith speaks before manifestation. Some of you are not weak in faith. You are just surrounded by the wrong voices. You are trying to build with one hand while doubt is tearing down with the other. Guard your ears. Guard your environment. Guard your thoughts. Because what you consistently hear will eventually shape what you consistently believe. This section will make you more mature and balanced. It teaches people responsibility, not just excitement. We've already established that faith speaks before manifestation, moves before evidence, and sees problems differently. Now we enter a very honest dimension of faith. What happens when your eyes shift? What happens when you need proof before belief? Let's use two powerful examples. Peter when he looked at the storm. Thomas when he needed to see first. These two stories reveal something important. Faith doesn't usually collapse suddenly, it shifts gradually. Keycap 1 Peter. When focus determines faith. Peter's story is found in Gospel of Matthew 14:22-33. Jesus had just fed thousands. The disciples were in a boat. A storm rose. Then they saw Jesus walking on the water. Peter said something bold. "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come." Jesus said, "Come," and Peter stepped out of the boat. Pause there. Peter did what many people pray for. He walked on water. He stepped into the impossible. He operated in supernatural boldness. His faith was active, but the Bible says something very specific. When he saw the wind, he was afraid. Notice that phrase, when he saw the wind. The storm didn't just appear. It was already there. The waves didn't just start. They were already present. The danger didn't increase, his focus shifted. Faith was working, until his attention moved from Jesus to the storm. And this is where many believers struggle today. You can pray with power, declare boldly, start strong, obey quickly, but when you begin to focus more on the bills, the diagnosis, the criticism, the delay, faith starts to weaken, not because God changed, but because focus changed. Peter did not sink immediately when he stepped out of the boat. He sank when fear replaced focus. And here is the key lesson for our audience. Faith works when your eyes are fixed on the word. Doubt grows when your eyes are fixed on the wind. Peter's mistake was not stepping out. Peter's mistake was shifting attention. And even then, this is powerful, Jesus immediately stretched out his hand. That tells us something comforting for this video. Even when your faith shakes, Jesus doesn't withdraw. He rescues. He restores. He lifts. Peter's story teaches us that faith requires continuous focus, not just initial boldness. Keycap 2 Thomas. When proof becomes a condition. Now let's look at Thomas in Gospel of John 20:24-29. Jesus had risen from the dead. The other disciples had seen him. They were excited. They testified to Thomas, "We have seen the Lord." Thomas responded, "Unless I see, unless I touch, I will not believe." Thomas wasn't rebellious. He wasn't evil. He was honest. But he set a condition for belief. And this is where many people struggle today. They say, "God, if you heal first, I'll believe. God, if you provide first, I'll trust. God, if you prove it, I'll follow." But faith works in reverse order. Faith believes first. Faith moves first. Faith trusts first. Thomas wanted evidence before trust. Peter trusted, but later shifted focus. Two different struggles, same root. Sight over faith. When Jesus appeared again, he did something merciful. He invited Thomas to touch his wounds. But then he said something that echoes into our generation. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." That statement is not a rebuke, it's an elevation. Jesus was describing mature faith. Faith that doesn't depend on physical confirmation. Faith that doesn't require constant reassurance. Faith that rests in what God has spoken. Keycap 3 Connecting Peter and Thomas to us. Peter represents distracted faith. Thomas represents conditional faith. Both loved Jesus. Both followed Jesus. Both struggled differently. And this is important for your audience. Struggle does not mean absence of faith. It means development of faith. Peter had boldness but needed stability. Thomas had caution but needed surrender. Many believers today fall into one of these patterns. The Peter pattern. You start strong. You declare loudly. You step out boldly. But when opposition rises, you look at the wind. Social media, negative voices, delay, unexpected challenges, and slowly, fear creeps in. Small diamond the Thomas pattern. You want to believe, you want to trust, but you need visible results first. You say, "Once I see progress, I'll relax. Once I see confirmation, I'll commit." But faith does not grow through sight. It grows through trust. Keycap 4 Why this matters in our 1-hour message. We are building a complete teaching on faith. Not shallow faith, not emotional faith, but enduring faith. Earlier we talked about faith speaking before manifestation, faith moving before evidence, faith seeing giants differently. Now we are showing the internal battles. Because the truth is, it's easier to step out of the boat once than to keep walking when waves hit. It's easier to believe in church than to believe in silence. It's easier to declare than to endure. Peter teaches us, keep your eyes on Jesus. Thomas teaches us, don't make proof your prerequisite. Keycap 5 Practical application for your viewer. Practical application for your viewers. Let's bring this home clearly and powerfully. When life feels stormy, refuse to magnify the wind. Refuse to obsess over the waves. Fix your focus intentionally. When doubt whispers, don't demand new signs. Revisit what God already said. Remember past testimonies. Faith is not blind, it is anchored. Peter sank because he looked away. Thomas hesitated because he looked for evidence. But both were restored because Jesus is patient. That's grace. And this is encouraging for your viewers. You may have moments of sinking. You may have seasons of questioning. But as long as you reach for Him, He will lift you. Keycap 6 Final takeaway for this segment. Faith is not about never feeling fear. It's about choosing focus over fear. Faith is not about never asking questions. It's about trusting even before all answers come. Peter teaches us, stay focused. Thomas teaches us, stop requiring proof. And Jesus teaches us, keep believing, even when you cannot see. This segment strengthens the middle portion of your 1-hour message. It shows depth. It shows honesty. It shows that faith is not automatic, it is intentional. And you can close this part of the video with something powerful like, don't look at the storm. Don't wait for proof. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Believe first, and you will see. Faith plus patience plus process. Joseph, process before palace. Open book. The story of Book of Genesis chapters 37 to 50. This section is crucial. We have talked about faith speaking before manifestation, faith moving before evidence, faith seeing problems differently, and faith overcoming fear and doubt. Now we must talk about something many believers ignore. Process. Because faith alone is powerful. Patience alone is necessary. But when you combine faith plus patience plus process, destiny is formed. And no biblical example explains this better than Joseph. Keycap 1 The dream was real, but so was the process. Joseph was a young man when God showed him his future. He dreamed that his brothers would bow to him. He dreamed of greatness. He saw leadership before he experienced it. But here is the truth we must teach your audience clearly. The dream was from God. The process was also from God. Many people love dreams. Few people love process. Joseph's dream did not take him to the palace. It first took him to rejection, a pit, slavery, false accusation, prison. Faith gave him the dream. Patience carried him through the process. In our generation, people want prophecy without preparation. But Joseph teaches us that God develops character before he releases position. Keycap to the pit. When faith is tested. Joseph's brothers threw him into a pit. Imagine this. You have a promise from God, but your current reality looks like the opposite. That is where many people lose faith. God, you showed me greatness. Why am I in a pit? This is where faith must mature. Because faith is not just believing when things look good. Faith is believing when circumstances contradict the promise. The pit was not punishment. It was preparation. The pit removed pride. The pit removed immaturity. The pit built endurance. In your video, emphasize this strongly. Sometimes your setback is actually God's setup. Keycap 3 Potiphar's house. Process through responsibility. Joseph was sold into slavery and taken to Egypt. Yet even as a slave, he worked with excellence. He did not say, "This is not my level." He did not complain about his environment. Instead, he remained faithful in small responsibilities. This is powerful for your audience. Many people say they have faith for big things, but they are careless with small assignments. Joseph shows us that faith is not just believing for elevation. Faith is being excellent where you are planted. Because process tests consistency, God watches how you handle small tasks, hidden seasons, uncelebrated obedience. The palace requires leadership. Leadership requires discipline. Discipline is built in hidden seasons. Keycap 4 False accusation. Integrity under pressure. Joseph was falsely accused and thrown into prison. This is where many believers become bitter. God, I was doing the right thing. Why am I suffering? Joseph had every reason to give up. He was betrayed by family, forgotten by friends, punished for integrity. But here is what makes Joseph extraordinary. He did not let pain change his character. Your audience must understand this. Process reveals whether your faith is emotional or rooted. If faith only works when life is smooth, it is shallow. But when faith survives injustice, it becomes powerful. Joseph did not become bitter. He did not become rebellious. He did not abandon God. Instead, he continued serving faithfully, even in prison. Keycap 5 The prison, the waiting season. Prison represents delay. This is the hardest part of faith plus patience plus process. Not the attack, not the accusation, but the waiting. Joseph interpreted dreams in prison and helped others. Yet when the opportunity came for someone to mention him to Pharaoh, he was forgotten for 2 more years. Imagine being forgotten. This is where many people lose patience. But here is the revelation. God uses waiting to build weight. If Joseph had entered the palace too early, his character would not have matched his position. Waiting builds emotional stability, spiritual maturity, wisdom, humility. Because many of your viewers are in their prison season. They are doing the right things. They are praying. They are believing. Yet nothing seems to be moving. Teach them this. Delay is not denial. Process is not punishment. Keycap 6. The palace. When process pays off. When the time was right, everything changed in one day. Pharaoh had a dream. Joseph was remembered. He interpreted the dream. And suddenly, the prisoner became Prime Minister of Egypt. But here is what people misunderstand. It looked sudden. It was not sudden. The palace was built in. The pit, the slavery, the accusation, the prison. God did not take Joseph around the process. He took him through it. And when Joseph finally stood before his brothers years later, he said something powerful. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. That statement reveals maturity. Process transforms pain into perspective. Keycap 7. Connecting this to our faith series. Let's connect Joseph's story to what we've already built for your YouTube teaching. Faith speaks before manifestation. Joseph had dreams before fulfillment. Faith gives boldness before results. He interpreted dreams confidently. Faith changes how you see problems. He saw purpose in suffering. Faith survives fear, doubt, impatience. And now we see, faith works with patience inside process. This completes a major spiritual truth. Faith without patience quits. Patience without faith loses vision. But faith plus patience plus process produces destiny. Keycap 8. What your audience must learn. End this section with practical application. If you are in the pit, stay faithful. If you are in Potiphar's house, stay excellent. If you are falsely accused, stay pure. If you are in prison, stay patient. Because the palace is not a location. It is a level of readiness. And readiness is built in process. Final encouragement for your viewers. Tell them this with passion. You may feel delayed. You may feel forgotten. You may feel misunderstood. But if God gave you the dream, He is also managing the process. Joseph did not chase the palace. He trusted God in the process. And that is the message for this generation. Stop trying to skip stages. Stop comparing timelines. Stop complaining about preparation. Your faith must survive the process. Because when preparation meets opportunity, destiny manifests. And when it finally happens, people will call it sudden. But you will know the truth. It was faith. It was patience. It was process. And God was working the whole time. When we talk about faith, many people get excited. When we talk about patience, many people get quiet. And when we talk about process, many people get uncomfortable. But the truth is this, faith without patience cannot survive the process. And the perfect biblical picture of that combination is the story of book of Job. This section of our 1-hour video is about endurance, not excitement, not noise, not quick miracles, but endurance under pressure. 1. Job. Faith that survives pressure. Job was not a weak believer. He was described as upright, disciplined, and God-fearing. Yet he lost his wealth, his business, his children, his health, his reputation, in one season. Notice something important. Job did not lose because he lacked faith. He lost while he had faith. That alone corrects a major misunderstanding many people have today. Some think that if you have faith, nothing bad will happen. But Job shows us something deeper. Faith is not proven when everything is working. Faith is proven when everything is falling apart. 2. Faith starts the journey, patience sustains it. In our generation, we love speed. Fast internet, fast food, fast success, fast relationships, fast results. But God often works through process. Imagine a young graduate applying for jobs for 2 years with no response. A small business owner reinvesting profits but not yet seeing growth. A content creator uploading videos weekly but barely getting views. A couple praying for a child for years. A student reading daily but still struggling with results. That is pressure. Job teaches us that faith says, God is able, but patience says, I will wait while He works. 3. The process is not punishment. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that delay equals rejection. Job's friends accused him. They assumed he did something wrong. Today, people still say, maybe you lack faith. Maybe God is angry with you. Maybe you missed your destiny. But the story of Job reveals something powerful. Sometimes you are in a process you don't understand, but God still trusts you. Let that sink in. Sometimes the pressure is not proof of failure. Sometimes it is proof of trust. 4. Present life example. Career pressure. Let's make this real. You graduate with big dreams. You pray. You fast. You apply. Nothing happens. Months turn to years. Friends are posting success online. You feel behind. Faith says, God has a plan. Patience says, I will not compromise my values to escape the wait. Process says, I am shaping you for where you are going. The waiting season is often a building season. If Job had quit in chapter 1, we would never see restoration. Many people abort their process because they cannot endure pressure. 5. Emotional endurance. Job did not pretend he was okay. He cried. He questioned. He expressed pain. That is important for this generation. Faith is not emotional denial. Patience is not silence. Process is not pretending. You can pray and still feel tired. Believe and still feel confused. Trust God and still cry at night. What matters is that you do not disconnect. Endurance is not the absence of emotion. Endurance is the refusal to quit. 6. Social pressure and misunderstanding. Job's friends misunderstood him. In today's world, social media can amplify pressure. You see engagement photos, new houses, promotions. God did it. Captions. Meanwhile, your life feels paused. Here's the danger. Comparison can weaken patience. But remember this. Different journeys, different timelines, different processes. Just because someone's harvest is visible does not mean their process was easy. 7. Faith without patience becomes frustration. Many believers start strong but collapse midway. Why? Because they expected faith to eliminate the process. But faith actually prepares you for the process. If you plant a seed today and dig it up tomorrow to check progress, you will kill it. That is what impatience does to destiny. Job stayed. Job endured. Job questioned, but he stayed. That staying power, is rare today. 8. Process develops depth. Imagine success without character. Imagine influence without maturity. Imagine wealth without discipline. It would destroy you. The process develops emotional stability, spiritual maturity, humility, perspective. Pressure reveals what is inside you. When everything was removed from Job, his faith was still there. If everything was removed from you, title, money, applause, would your faith remain? That is the real question. 9. Restoration is not always instant. At the end of the story, Job was restored. But notice, restoration came after endurance. Too many people want chapter 42 Rasul. TS with chapter 1 patience. The formula we are building in this video is simple. Faith plus patience plus process equals sustainable restoration. Not temporary hype, not emotional excitement, but lasting stability. 10. Modern day examples of endurance. Let's bring this home. 1. The entrepreneur starts with small capital, fails twice, customers are few, but continues learning, adjusting, improving. That is job-like endurance. 2. The student reads daily, practices, fails mock exams, improves slowly. That is process. 3. The person healing emotionally. After betrayal or disappointment, they choose not to become bitter. They rebuild slowly. That is patience. 4. The believer waiting on God. Prays consistently without visible results. Still worships. Still serves. That is faith under pressure. Endurance is not loud. It is consistent. 11. What endurance really looks like. Endurance is showing up when you feel discouraged. Praying when you feel unheard. Working when results are invisible. Choosing integrity when shortcuts are available. Trusting God when explanations are absent. Job never got a full explanation of everything that happened. Sometimes God gives restoration, not explanation. And maturity accepts that. 12. How to build endurance in real life. For your viewers, make this practical. 1. Build daily discipline. Small consistency builds patience muscle. 2. Control what you can. Job couldn't control the storm, but he controlled his response. 3. Limit negative voices. Just like Job's friends, not every voice around you understands your process. 4. Remember past victories. When pressure increases, remind yourself of times God came through before. 5. Stay connected spiritually. Prayer, reflection, gratitude, these strengthen endurance. 13. The message for this generation. We live in a microwave culture, but God is a slow cooker. Microwaves heat fast. Slow cookers build depth. Your life is not late. Your process is not wasted. Your pressure is not pointless. Job's story in the book of Job teaches us that endurance is not weakness, it is spiritual strength. Final message for the video. Tell your audience this clearly. If you are in a season where Nothing makes sense. Results are delayed. Pressure feels heavy. People misunderstand you. You are not abandoned. You may be in process. And if you combine faith to believe, patience to wait, commitment to the process, you will not break under pressure. Because endurance produces depth, depth produces stability, and stability produces lasting restoration. Stay in the process. Stay in faith. Stay patient. Your chapter 42 is coming, but only if you survive chapter 1. Faith starts the journey. Patience protects it. Character sustains it. As we continue teaching, we are no longer just talking about faith as a moment. We are talking about faith as a lifestyle. Not a spark, but a structure. Not excitement, but endurance. If faith is the ignition, patience is the steering wheel, and character is the engine that keeps the car running long after the applause fades. Let's break this down deeply and in order. Keycap 1. Faith starts the journey. Every meaningful journey with God begins with faith. Faith is the courage to step when you don't see the full map. Think about Abraham in Genesis 12. God told him to leave his country and go to a land he would show him. No GPS, no detailed blueprint, just a promise. Faith is movement before evidence. We've already spoken about how David spoke before victory, Peter stepped before stability, the woman with the issue of blood touched before confirmation. Faith always starts something. It starts the business before the profit, the prayer before the testimony, the discipline before the transformation, the healing before the medical report changes. But here's the truth many people don't talk about. Starting is exciting. Continuing is harder. That's why faith alone is not enough for the full journey. Faith opens the door, but something must keep you inside the process. Keycap 2. Patience protects the journey. Once faith starts the journey, patience becomes your shield. Many people begin in faith but quit in frustration. Look at Joseph in the book of Genesis. He had a dream, that was faith's beginning. But between the dream and the palace were betrayal, slavery, false accusations, prison. Joseph's faith started the journey. But patience protected it. If Joseph had become bitter, reckless, or revenge-driven in prison, he would have disqualified himself from the palace. Patience protects you from premature decisions, emotional reactions, self-sabotage, listening to wrong voices. We talked earlier in the video about impatience being one of the reasons people struggle in faith. Impatience says, if it hasn't happened yet, maybe it won't. If it's taking too long, maybe I should compromise. Let me force what God is forming. But patience understands something powerful. Delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. Process is not punishment. Patience is faith stretched over time. When faith says, God can. Patience says, God will, in His timing. Without patience, faith becomes fragile. With patience, faith becomes mature. Keycap 3. Character sustains the journey. Now this is where it becomes deeper. Even with faith, even with patience, if character is weak, destiny collapses. Character is who you are when no one is watching. Character is what you choose when compromise is easier. Character is consistency when applause is gone. Let's go back to David. Before he became king, he was a shepherd. Nobody saw him in the field. But he protected sheep as if he was protecting a kingdom. That is character. When he faced Goliath, it wasn't just faith speaking. It was a history of private integrity backing public boldness. Character sustains what faith starts. Because here's the truth. God may give you opportunities your character cannot maintain. Many people pray for elevation but ignore transformation. They want platforms but resist pruning. They want influence but reject discipline. Character sustains success. Without character, power corrupts, fame destroys, wealth misleads, influence exposes weakness. But when character is strong, success doesn't change you, pressure doesn't break you, criticism doesn't derail you, delay doesn't poison you. Joseph again is a perfect example. When Potiphar's wife tempted him, no one was there to see. But Joseph understood that character sustains destiny. He didn't just want the dream. He wanted to survive it. Keycap 4. Why these three must work together. Faith without patience becomes frustration. Patience without faith becomes passive waiting. Faith,